everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a bye day. And today, Olivia, it's a beautiful spring day outside, and we are going to talk about golf. Do you like golf? No, you don't like golf? Well, I like golf. I like to play a little bit of golf. Everyone's talking about Rory McIlroy. It's spring. People want to get out on the links. So we've had a couple really interesting books on golf come into the shop. But just in case golf isn't your thing, I just came over from book buying, which takes place every week at the Scholar, and Jeff was back. And if you're a watcher of Buy Day, you remember Jeff a couple weeks ago brought us a first edition To Kill a Mockingbird. Well, this week he brought us a couple things that were incredibly special, literally hot off the press. Haven't even had a chance to price them or process them for the store, but I wanted to show you these two. So come in and let me show you two things that Jeff brought us. The first is a copy of the Strand magazine. Now, if you're a regular watcher of Buy Day, you know that I've already done a Buy Day on Arthur Conan Doyle and his Sherlock Holmes stories from the Strand magazine. I'll put a link to that in this episode on YouTube, so click on that if you want to see more in-depth conversation of Doyle. But this one's even more special because this is a later Strand magazine edition with a new Sherlock Holmes story, and it's the first story that Doyle serialized after he had very famously killed off Sherlock Holmes. He literally brought him back, and he did it in a sort of tricky way, which is he set the story before Sherlock Holmes' death. But the famous story, of course, is Hound of the Baskervilles. And this is the first edition Strand magazine of Hound, and it is the first to introduce to audiences an image. That's right, an image of the Hound itself. So that is how the Hound was first seen. That's a famous Sidney Paget illustration who illustrated all of Doyle's works. He was paid a lot of money for Hound of the Baskervilles, became a huge success, and was so much of a pressure that Doyle just brought Holmes back for good anyway after this. But this is the return of Sherlock Holmes and the first ever image of the Hound. Pretty neat. But Jeff wasn't done. He impressed us even further by bringing us the rarest of all Stephen King books. Do you know what the rarest of all Stephen King books is? Well, we previously, I would have said it was Carrie. That was his first book. It was published in a limited print run. I think Carrie was published in a print run of 30,000. King was not really known. It's been about 50 years since that book came out. But a little later on, as he was getting more famous, he published the first book in the Dark Tower series called The Gunslinger. And this is, in fact, the rarest of all Stephen King books. Because King, while already famous, had satisfied his contract with Viking and Doubleday, and he wanted to do something that would become a series. And he published this book with a little-known publisher by the name of Donald M. Grant in West Kingston, Rhode Island, and with a press run, believe it or not, of only 10,000 copies. So at the same time, his other books are coming out with Viking Doubleday press runs of like 250,000, 300,000. He publishes Dark Tower in a small little limited edition run. Now you can tell it's a first edition if you look here, Olivia, because it actually says first edition. This is the rarest of all, the smallest print run of any Stephen King title, only 10,000 copies. So that compares to only 5,000 for To Kill a Mockingbird. Remember, we said the publishers advised Harper Lee it wouldn't sell. Well, this was done for a different reason. Of course, it sold out immediately, and it's almost impossible to find. So the holy grail of Stephen King collectors is actually The Gunslinger. There it is, brought to us by Jeff. And I know Jeff's watching, and he enjoyed the last episode. Thanks for bringing us such incredible books. But now it's on to golf. That was for those who maybe weren't big golf fans. But if you're a golf fan, are you ready for some exciting books? I like to buy, and you'll know this about me if you watch Buy Day regularly, I like to buy medical books, Olivia. I love old medical books, especially ones with interesting drawings and anatomy and whatnot. And I got this book originally as just a medical book, but then it turned out to be something even more than a medical book. Let me show you what it is. It is called The Gentleman's Companion, or A Character of True Nobility and Gentility. And it was written by a doctor, an early English doctor in the 17th century by the name of William Ramsay. Now, William Ramsay went to medical school in Scotland at an institution called St. Andrews. Do you know why St. Andrews is famous? Well, Olivia, it was where golf was invented. St. Andrews was the first golf course in the world. And he got to watch, possibly in between classes, he would walk back and forth over the St. Andrews links, and he would see people playing this game of golf, which was popular in St. Andrews, but wasn't popular all over the world at the time. And as a doctor, he thought it was his responsibility to give advice on how to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And he became the doctor after the English Civil War for Charles II, the King of England. And you know what he recommended? And this is the first book ever to do it. He recommended the king play golf. He recommended golf for health. And it's a really sort of cool passageway. Look in here, okay? And we'll read about it. Now, exercises and recreations which are used abroad that may be fit to gentlemen, so used abroad, I guess Scotland being abroad, gentlemen in England, the most healthy are golf. Look how he spells golf. G-A-U-F-F, very phonetic spelling. Thereby striking the ball, exercise the whole man together with the walk, and may be used moderately without any excess or violence. So there it is, golf, no violence. Much better sport for kings than really any other sport. This turns out not just to be a normal medical book. It was written by this Scottish, doctor who was also an astrologer, a bit of a magician, and he recommended golf as a healthy activity. Now, what makes this book even a little bit more interesting is look at the book plate. The book plate is just a really cool book plate. It says "Loyal je suis," which means I am loyal, and it's got this sort of comic-like portrait of a genteel English man, right? Well, it turns out that this book comes from a haunted manor house in England, which is currently a hotel, and it is one of the most haunted sites in all of England. And apparently, the gentleman here depicted, who also was famous for loving dogs. He founded the Kennel Club, and he just was a dog lover. It still roams that library and that hotel today. So people will go from all over England to stay in this haunted hotel, Olivia, where they will see images of this bearded gentleman and his dog. So it is a spooky book too. And just one last thing, and just as from a publishing standpoint, I really like this book because the publisher here, who was a London publisher, also lists the other types of books that he printed at the time. And so this is a nice book list in the end. And you could get everything from a guide to how to be a midwife, which is in keeping, to this one here, a choice banquet of witty jests, rare fancies, and pleasant novels. So which would you rather have? Not sure.
Pleasant novels.
Yeah, pleasant novels and witty jests. But that was an interesting story. So the first book ever to recommend golf for exercise. We also have two books by the same author related to golf, but I didn't know it at first. Somebody came in who was a big fan of the author H.J. Whigham. Never heard of him, either had I. Well, he wrote a book called The Persian Problem, and it's actually a pretty interesting book. If we look at it, it talks about an examination of the rival positions of Russia and Great Britain and Persia, and it was written early, so this is 1903. So this is a very early 20th century book on the Persian problem and on how this is sort of the diplomatic hot seat of the world. And I think it was a rather prescient view for the early 20th century. And as a work of diplomacy, it's an interesting book. A work of history is an interesting book. But it turns out that Whigham was not famous for the Persian problem. No, he was famous for a different book, which he published, which was professional book, more fun book. It was How to Play Golf. And this is the first ever instruction book or golf instruction book published in the United States that really popularized how to play golf in America. And this was published in 1897 before the Persian problem, right after H.J. Whigham won the U.S. Amateur, which is pretty exciting. And the same year, just about, that the U.S. Open started. So this is capitalizing on the emerging fad of golf for the first time in American history. Whigham, interesting Scottish, also from St. Andrews, where he learned to play golf. So St. Andrews connecting all of these books together. What also makes this book interesting is it is the first book to be illustrated with photographs, action photographs, showing you how to play golf. How about that? If you weren't interested yet, I bet you're interested now. I like this because this is Whigham himself, and this is Whigham himself demonstrating how to drive the golf ball. What do you think? Impressed? Almost like a flip book where we could flip it and turn it into a motion picture. But it is actually about technique and demonstrating technique. And the first book ever to do that in American history, which I think is pretty cool. Okay, well, we are going to end with a funny book. Now, does it make you want to hit the links? Maybe. Okay. We're going to end with a funny book. It's golf related. You won't get it unless you like golf. But it's how to line up your fourth ball. And this is actually really good. If you like golf, you're going to like the chapters. You've got fantastic chapters like proper etiquette when you're playing with a complete jerk, crying and how to handle it, and other golf classics such as how to estimate the distance the ball would have traveled were it not unjustly interrupted on its way to where it was supposedly going. An amusing book for the golf enthusiast, available very inexpensively right here at the Midtown Scholar. All right, well, let's hit the links. That is another edition of Buy Day Friday. I hope you were watching. Jeff brought some other interesting stuff, which I'm going to go back and research, and maybe it will appear in next week's Buy Day. But until then, I'll see you every Friday at noon for more adventures in the world of books.